to do that here. Okay, Facebook.
Here with my dear friend, great drummer, great percussionist, great human being, Clif Kaufman.
Thank you.
And been a big supporter and ally to me for quite a while. And I appreciate that. And we're around Christmas season, so give a shout out to Jesus on his close to be birthday.
Are you a Jew for Jesus?
Well, I mean, he was another crazy Jew. I could relate to him on that level. And, I don't claim to know anything about the reality of who he was or what he did. But my intuitive feeling is that he was the real deal, at least in terms of trying to bring some light to the people. And that's probably why they offed him.
Yeah.
But that's what happens to these people who really try to change things things like Martin Luther King, for example.
Yeah, I went to Lorraine Motel last night.
Yeah, this is Memphis. This is where Martin Luther King got shot. There's a lot of
April 4th.
heavy racial history here. Yeah.
So before we fully start, will you open up your Facebook, and we're gonna just share it to Ra Kalam's page so that people who want to see it. So if you go to Facebook,
just allow for my computer idiocy. There it is.
There it is.
Facebook.
Okay, and then let's see, put in Cliff.
Let you do that.
There, okay.
Yeah. I never had a smartphone before, so I'm still a complete idiot with it. It's only had it for about a year.
Okay. Okay, so we're sharing there. Share.
When my son is around, he gives me lessons.
Nice.
Sometimes over the phone. Mostly I'm on my own. I don't know how to use it.
Well, I know you know how to use it some because I know you're posting some. So.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm
Okay,
trying. I'm trying. Yeah.
So I think it's shared. Let's see, page. Yeah, so share to your record. So I've shared it, and then you want me to put your phone? How do you turn it off? There we go. Okay.
Yeah, you want to put it on the floor or something, or on the stool or something? Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for making the time, and it's always seeing you is always really nice.
It's always
nice to see you, and
yes, of course. Yeah, definitely.
I think it's been around 15 years from when we first met. When I took a lesson from you.
Okay.
Which I'm guessing exactly how long it's been, but yeah, it's been a while. And I remember the second time I came to Boston and took a lesson with you, we did it was like an all day hang, and
my lessons sometimes turn into that.
It was like I think I was at your house for like 10 to 12 hours, and I remember you took me to the tea stop because I had taken the tea there.
Oh right. Okay.
And I remember you were playing some music of yours. And I remember thinking, it kind of seems like we're friends. Like, just like it seemed like there was a friendship connection. So anyway, so I've appreciated your friendship and your leadership as a mentor, teacher. Having not seen you regularly, I would record the lessons, but it was like, it's more of the things you've said. And we talk on the phone sometimes, that kind of things that you've said that kind of seep in. And I remember you saying before the first lesson I took with you, these things are just common sense, like basically something to that extent that these, they're just common sense things. They're things, but really, they're not complicated, but they're maybe things that one wouldn't always think of.
That's right. Well, there's nothing in that what I have to share that's particularly brilliant or earth-shaking or anything. That stuff is unshareable. But the simple stuff. But I don't know. It might have been Mark Twain who said it, but somebody said it, is that common sense is not common at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it also depends on what you're trying to do with music. It's like a lot of my teaching method is different from how I play. At this point, I like to play free, which is from zero, and hopefully, not much of anything of the past. Just make it up as it goes, and follow the flow. But I think there's some real foundational things that if a drummer is serious, they ought to do. Again, people are free to disagree or not take that path if it doesn't interest them. Mm-hmm. But one thing, and I noticed when I was at NEC at the school, almost none of the students, they all wanted to play jazz, but none of them were interested or had any clue of how to play dance music. Mm-hmm. Like get a bunch of people, preferably not all Caucasian people too, mm-hmm. dancing to your drumming. That's a certain test, actually.
That's the foundation, you think?
Well, I would say that, if you go into a room of non-Caucasians and get them dancing from your drumming, you're not really ready for jazz.
And also,
people go right to jazz, but they don't get this more basic stuff. And plus, it's a lot of fun.
I was about to say, are they missing a great experience of feeling that?
Oh, it's a lot of fun.
That connection.
When I was doing that kind of music with Mozamba in the late 80s, early 90s, we had an Afro pop funk band dance, and we had some incredible Brazilian ladies and African ladies and dudes. Dancers are just beautiful people and physically. Yeah. And as the night goes on, more clothes come on, a lot of
sweating and
a lot of romances start on the dance floor. People go out for that reason to dance and have fun, meet a girl or whatever genre, whatever gender, there's 28 flavors now, but or more, but anyway, no, I had fun doing that, and it's good. So, a lot of my teaching is based on that, and it's really what I got from the first gigs that I ever did, which was playing vibes with salsa band. A bunch of crazy Puerto Ricans in the Bronx. I was like 14 or 15. And one of the things that I noticed was the drummers. The conga player was great. He was the leader. He was great. And there was a timbale guy. And everybody, all the horn players played shekere and cowbell. So there's always like 4 or 5 percussion, bongos. And what I noticed was that they were improvising a lot, much in the way that jazz people do. What I associated with jazz, very free-flowing, creative, always changing, throwing down, just really improvising, and yet it was always danceable. The people dance all night long, literally all night long. We play from 8 at night to 10 to 5 in the morning, like 8 sets. And even then there'd be a couple of, we call them baracho, like really drunk fools who say, "Hey man, where you going? Come on, man, the party's just started. Let's go. It's 5 in the morning." Go home, man. But, yeah, well, they were, that's the people people love to dance. I don't know if it's still that way. I hope so, but it was back in the 60s. And anyway, so I remember asking the drummers, about this. You're so free, so creative, but at the same time, the groove is always there. There's no doubt about it. And they said to me something like, "Oh, it's the clave, man. Don't you know about the clave?" I said, "No, I'm like a 15."
So they were letting you play with them without knowing about the clave?
No, but I was just playing vibes.
You're playing melody.
I was soloing over the groove, and the groove was so strong, it was easy to play. I mean, it was flying already, so I just had to.
Had you learned certain melodies that were the songs they were playing, or were you?
No, that's the other interesting thing was they had no music paper whatsoever. They all learned the shit by ear from the radio. They were playing hit songs of the Latin radio.
So was this your first experience playing by ear, or had you been playing by ear?
Only my whole life I've only played by ear. I mean, I can read music if I have to.
Well, can we kind of go
you
back?
You notice there's no music stands in my house. I think you might have noticed that.
Yes, I noticed that. But I do know that you do write down some music that you have. I know you have boxes full of songs that you've written.
That's true.
And,
it's in the other room.
And I know that you're writing songs now that don't have.
Well, let me just finish the thought of how my teaching thing came about. Was from these early days, and they told me about the clave. They said, "Oh, it's the clave, man," and I said, "I don't. I'm a 15-year-old white guy. What's that?" And they explained to me that, "Well, we got the 2-3, which is the 3-2, and I said, I remember asking another question that was a pretty good question. I think was, okay, that's 5 hits. Is there any one most important? And they were music school, so they couldn't say "and of 2." But they sang it to me. So yeah, 2-3. So I started hearing that big "and of 2" in the second bar. I knew it was a 2-3. I heard it more in the first bar. I knew it was a 3-2. So I started to recognize these structures that they were playing from. And so that was like the light bulb went on over my head. I said, that's an important secret. But I also, well, it's not a secret, but I didn't know about it. And so, but then of course I also realized that as much as I love Latin, Afro-Rican, salsa music, I wasn't going to just play that, because I'm into everything. I've always been into everything. So I thought, well, I better not just master the "and the 2." I better master every part of the bar. And if you divide the bar into eighth notes as a primary division, of course we can go faster or slower. But yeah, I think of eighth notes as the main flow of time, the ride, the grid, with the understanding that sometimes it's rounded eighth with a swing feel, or sometimes straight eighth. The Latin was almost all straight eighth, you know.
Yeah.
And so, but eighth notes nevertheless. So I just said, well, I'm gonna start working on all the points, including one.
So that's where the resolution point concept came from.
Exactly. And that's what I've been mostly sharing with students, is because it focuses people, and they also can really work on not just to hit a one or a two or and of the one or whatever it is, but to improvise around it.
Would you give an example of singing that with on just the one of the first bar?
Sure. I'm 74 now. I still practice this because I always feel like I could do it better. Like I have, I hear certain drummers play the one, and I say, oh yeah, I still got a way to go. My one is obviously a very important one. Although they're all important. Jazz, Latin, a lot of times it's and of four.
Yeah.
And of two is very important for the Latin music, for the second line, New Orleans. They're all good. They all have their own flavor, and they're all important.
I wanted to stop you for a second. I forgot to say something that I just wanted to let people know who are tuning in, that you're going to be in Nashville on January 18th doing a mass, and then a concert with Jeff Coffin, Danny Gottlieb, and Michael Adkins.
Yeah.
And that's going to be live online as well, so people who are tuned in. Anyway, I just want to make sure I said that. Sorry to interrupt you.
Good. I'm glad you remember, because I would.
And I'll probably say it again. But there, if you go to Sound and Rhythm Drumming School, there is a link to get tickets.
And the store is the Nelson Drum Shop.
Nelson Drum Shop, which is a really great, like, vintage drum shop in Nashville.
Beautiful.
They have a lot of old drums.
Cool. Maybe I'll borrow some stuff.
Oh,
for
yeah.
Performance.
Yeah.
And get to play with my old friend Danny Gottlieb.
And the first time you've ever played together, right?
We've never played together.
It's amazing.
We're like, he's like, I'm like his uncle or something, He's
Well, you're
like
not that much older than him, really, are you? Like 8 years older, maybe?
I don't know. I think I'm a little older than that.
Okay.
He always struck me as just a kid.
But he kind of followed you in a lot of ways. He
was like a puppy dog. But now he's a grown man.
But he also followed you in some groups that you played in. Right?
Oh, he's a great drummer. There's no question about it. And one thing, when I look at drummers, I look at the body language, and just his movement is so loose and beautiful. And again, this is also part of my mission these days. Is I don't think so. Is Danny doesn't play much free music. He plays groove stuff, jazz stuff. Plays with Gary Sinise, these shows and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's ace at it. He can play anything you put in front of him. He can read. He can, show drummer, big band, anything.
Yeah.
So he's doing what I would call normal music, and that's not what I'm doing at all. But I love getting people who are masterful in different genre, whatever it may be, jazz, Latin, funk, and taking them out of there. I played with some flamenco guys in Spain. They were flamenco masters, got them to play free. And it took them like 20 minutes to feel comfortable. And then they were flying, man.
And that was with Lionel Lueck.
And he was on there too. And he's also, I don't think, used to playing free. But the flamenco guys, man, these kids was something else. Caminero is the bass player, and Bandolero, the drummer, which basically means the bandit,
Yeah.
And anyway, but so that'll be fun to do with to get with Danny, and also Jeff Coffin. I know he has played free, but it's probably not the main thing he does. He does funky stuff, so it'll be fun. Michael Adkins, we're already on that beam together, so we've been playing free together.
And Michael, you had said, had played with Paul Motion.
He made a couple of very beautiful, unusual, visionary records with Paul Motion, who to me is one of the all-time greatest natural drummers. Definitely one of my heroes, and a beautiful cat too, Paul. So I haven't forgot the question. We do both of us do this.
Yeah, I'm really tangential, and so, but I'm glad you stay focused. And
sometimes, yeah. But you wanted me to give an example of working a resolution point. This is the kind of stuff that I work with my students. So if we say one in the first bar of a 2-bar phrase, I usually start with a 2-bar phrase, although you can do longer phrases. But it's kind of the 2 bars is basically the smallest phrase that you'll usually find. 1 bar is like, that's too small a box, and that's why the Latin clave is a 2-bar phrase. The second line, at least 2. Again, it could be more. So all right, so here's a 1. Let's see what I got. Don't do the bone to the back to get back to the on to get on to it bone to the bench and do the bone to the on to it bounty don't to get to the bar to get back to it to the bar to get back to get back to the on to the on that oh gonna undo that undo that undo the it's get it do it's get it until the bounty until the bank to get it 3 4 1 and do the back at that and do the back at that boom to the back and back bang and boo back at that and do the take it and boo the bomb till the bang get down back at that and do the boom and then boom back and the bounce it bang and do the boom to the bang to the bounce get it on bang to the bench bounce it get in 2 2 3 4 1 and so on and so forth. And I'm cutting it short now, but I think you could tell I did this shit all day. I did this all day, hours on one idea, and would also put in a few limitations on it, and then trying to not be limited, which is
what kind of limitations?
I try not to do anything faster than an eighth note. Again, because I'm thinking danceable. I'm not thinking solo. No triplets.
Yeah.
Of course, we can do a triplet grid too, you know. And the idea.
What would a triplet grid be like?
Well, okay, similar idea. I could do one as well and say, Jean, or we could do that and the two. Jean and do it back and dig it. Don't and do it and take it back to the own. But the got to but dig it up and dig it one like a you call it an and of two rounded, or you could call it the let of two, one triplet, two triplet. It's like an and. So you can do triplets.
Is it kind of like a swung version of the most important note with the and of two that you were talking about when you were playing the music with the Afro-Cuban music or Afro-Puerto Rican?
You're right. I don't remember any doing any 6/8, but definitely you find that.
You didn't find that it was swung. It was swinging it.
Everything with that group, if I remember, I mean it's 1960 something was straight eighth.
Okay. So can we kind of go? We can go back like to
interesting enough, in those days there was a kind of a separation. The Latin cats had a hard time swinging, playing rounded because they were so used to the straight, and the jazz cats had a hard time playing Latin because they were so used to the swing, to the rounded feel. Now, of course, you got zillion guys who do it all because it's become. And if you're going to be a drummer, I would say, you got to get down with the round and the straight.
Yeah.
And there are other grids as well that are more.
There was like what people say 6/8. They probably did some of those, like the ding 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 ding.
No, I'm talking about just in the eighth note. You have a rounded eighth.
No, I understand, but did they play some, or did you all play some songs that did have that sort of bell?
The 6/8. I don't remember in those days doing that. Could have. Yeah, because you have. Again, even the triplet can be a swung, or it can be more, which is really like straight anyway, except instead of 4/8 notes, it's 6/8 note. 1 2 3 4 5 6 so
yeah.
But anyway, I recommend just 4/4, just eighth notes I'm still working on that. Of course, you can work on anything, whatever tickles your fancy. But the idea is also with what I have to share is I call it living music, which is whatever you want to work on, you sing it and you dance it. And the idea is you get it as squinchable as possible that way, and then it will translate to the drums.
Yeah. And so you remind me of a few things I remember from my first lessons with you. But I'd like to go back to like even before you played with those groups. But before that, So you'd
That was my
mentioned
first gigs, I think.
those were your first gigs.
Yeah, well, I actually got paid. It wasn't much, so but I got paid something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sold it a lot too.
Sold a lot.
I sold it every tune long, and I realized in retrospect, I think a couple of reasons. One is Latin people like the vibes.
Mm-hmm.
Tito Puente played vibes. Cal Jader played vibes. This other group, I can't think of the name now. They're Puerto Rican too. Oscar Hernandez. They have a vibes player. A woman, beautiful woman, played vibes and marimba. But also, I think it was a novelty to have this young gringo in this totally Latin scene. You know, nobody speaking English.
Yeah.
And also, the trumpet players needed a break because they were hitting double high C's, 8 sets in a row. So the longer I soloed, the more they could rest their chops.
And maybe it was a sound that was not common for.
Baya, Bobby, Baya, go man, go man. So I played almost everything in octaves because I had no mics and the band was loud, and the only way you could even hear what I was playing is I had to play in octaves.
You like 2 mouths or 4 mouths?
2. But I had pretty good aim in those days. Now, if I tried it, I'm sure I'd be missing and hitting sevenths and ninths. I haven't played vibes in years. Playing octaves, you have to keep that distance, But it sounded good, I had a cheap set of Jaco vibes. They weren't like deluxe vibes, But I had a good time, and I sold a lot. Watched the dancers, was great. I saw a lot of cerveza being consumed, and probably there was some stronger things going on in the men's room that I didn't even see because I was just a kid. But it was a great first playing experience. First gigs was to play with those cats, and they taught me about clave, and then from that I extrapolated what I call the resolution point meditations. So, and it could be anyone. It could be a 3 in the first part. 1, 2, 3, to get it, do it back to on to get on to it bone to it to get to it bone to get it bone to get to it bone back to get it bone to get back at it bone to it bone to get to it back at it bone to get the bone to get it don't do the don't bang bang bone to bang bang to booba do the bit on 1 2 and 3 to get out to get they got to do anyone could be all day long, and the idea is to keep it danceable but still be creative on it. So it's basically a door to playing groove stuff, danceable stuff, which usually needs an element of repetition. Doesn't need complete repetition, although people do that with the beatbox, with the drum machines, and they get this exact repetition. And if it's funky, okay, it's really good, you can dig it. But no, all the great players that I saw, funk players too, they didn't play the exact same shit over and over. They improvised on it, but the groove was there because they had to play for dancing and for people. So I think that's a good kind of training. It's not necessarily an end point, although it could be, because as you said, doing those kind of gigs, a lot of fun. You do jazz gigs, it's almost all guys, music students and stuff. When we're playing dance music, a lot of a mix of men and women.
Yeah,
and we come and have a good time. And I always felt like I was doing a service to the people, because people have a hard life, and so they come out to party and dance. And I felt that there was a kind of a selfless service in that. You didn't feel like you were. It wasn't necessarily just your own expression. It was that exactly. I never soloed at all.
You never soloed.
And with Mozamba.
Mozamba. Okay.
Right? Yeah, we just played groove, and we would have drum breakdowns. We always had several percussionists, including Billy Martin, Ben Whitman, Sahad Davis. We had a bunch of percussionists play with us. But I had a rule too: is when we had a drum breakdown, nothing faster than eighth notes. So you can improvise, but no, but nothing faster than, because I noticed that when you kept it in the eighth note, that kept it danceable. Okay, yeah. For the people, and we were playing for dancers, Yeah. And so no, I really enjoyed that, and I think it's a good thing to start with, and in some cases stay with. I mean, you go see Eddie Palmieri, they're still playing Latin dance music. It's still great, and people love it. Yeah, it's a good life. You can have fun doing that. I'm one of those people who had to evolve, so I'm never standing still. I'm always, everything's a stepping stone
Yeah.
But that's the kind of person I am. Not everybody's like that. Some people find their niche, they love it, they're comfortable, and spend their whole life doing it. But that's not me. You know?
Yeah.
But I do think it was valuable to go through it. Very valuable. You know?
So before that was your first gig playing in the Latin bands.
Yeah, I think so.
You grew up in New York. You lived in a building with Max Roach, with Art Blakey, Abby Lincoln, and you say Rahsaan, Roland, Kirk. Is that
Elvin
was in your building?
Yeah.
So
Max, Art Blakey.
What ages are we talking about?
Max was married to Abby Lincoln, so she was there. Rahsaan, Roland, Kirk also moved into the building at one point.
What age? Like how around what ages was that? Was that like from really little to?
Man, you're asking me chronologies. And
it doesn't have to be exact. I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, okay. Teenage.
So you moved into this building, and was it?
Yeah, when I was really young, I lived in Queens, which was more like I was into playing ball. I was an athlete. I was into Little League, Pop Warner Football League. Queens was all about baseball diamonds and football fields, and it was a sporting thing. And I was into sports, but I also realized, as much as I loved it, I was a slow, short, white guy, so I didn't have a whole lot of future in it, you know. Also, farsighted in those days. It was before contact lenses, so you didn't see anybody in football or wearing glasses. You know, so I was good, actually. I was considering those, genetic limitations. I was very good. I was very good at sports, and in a certain way, I see a connection.
To drums.
Well,
right?
Again, it was body language. You know, it's like my hero baseball player was Willie Mays.
Okay.
And I remember I copied how he swung the bat and how he kept his legs wide. And so I remember seeing drummers move and try to copy the movement if I thought it was graceful. He was so great. Well, to this day, still the best baseball player I've ever seen is Willie Mays. And
so you go to games and see him live.
I did see him once live.
Okay.
I saw him mostly on TV. We had a little tiny black and white TV, but we were one of the first people on our block to have a TV.
So when did the interest in music start?
I think around 10. I would
still in Queens.
Yeah, probably. I went to I was. I went to a summer camp, like a day camp. My parents sent me to this day camp, and interestingly, it was like 600 kids. And I won the best all-around athlete award out of the whole camp. I was the hero of they call it the color war, which they never would do now because it'd be so politically incorrect. But they would divide the camp into green team, gold team, and have all these events and go for a week competition. At the end, they'd see which team won, you know. And I hit the home run that won the softball game that was the deciding factor that made gold or whatever it was. Anyway, and I remember at that camp, they had like a little talent show, and some kid got up and did like a snare drum solo or something. And I remember, and all the girls was looking at him, and I immediately thought, you know, and I'll admit to this, it was, you know, very base motive, not a spiritual motive about music. I thought, shit, I could do better than that. I never played the drums.
So it wasn't musically what he was doing. It was more seeing that the girls were interested.
Exactly. I said, man, I could do better than that. And then they look at me. I knew right away I could play better than that. Even without playing, I just knew it.
It's funny because one of my first experiences where made me want to play the drums was a kid playing drum set for a school production where I was like, that sounds really cool. I want to be able to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
but there for you it was, this I can do better, and the girls like it.
And watch me instead, right? And I remember in the early days, whenever I did play drums, I was very aware of whether people were watching me or not. You know, that was important to me at that time. But I outgrew that fairly soon, where it became I just wanted to be able to sit behind the drums and make some magic. Yeah. And I didn't care if anybody. I mean, it's nice to play for people, but to this day, I hardly ever play for people, and I'm not upset by that. You know, I'd like to play more, especially now that I'm getting older. My time on earth is shorter. I like to bring whatever I have out to the people more. That would be nice. But my whole life, I've hardly played for people, and it doesn't bother me. And the greatest drummer that I ever heard hardly ever played out gigs was Edgar Bateman. And so I really was, and I remember when I heard Edgar Bateman, who was not successful on a material level, or Elmo Hope, another one of my mentors, great piano player, was also not I mean, he was a contemporary of Bud Powell and Thelonious Monk, but least famous of the three and had the hardest life. They all had hard lives but those days. But yeah, these were my heroes, and they weren't gigging a lot or famous or successful, but they just played so beautiful. And I just wanted to play. I thought, man, if I could play 25% as good as Edgar Bateman, I'd be a happy cat. Whether I ever did a gig or whether anybody watched me play. And also I got into Coltrane, which really changed my vibe, because I could tell there was a spiritual component in Coltrane that I did not hear in the other jazz. I mean, all music has a spiritual component in a way, but Coltrane was very directly prayer, divine.
Yeah.
His vibe was completely different, and that changed me when I heard that. And then it became less about ego or whether anybody was watching me or girls or anything. But yeah, the first time it was like that. I was 10 years old, and I thought, man, I could play that.
So did you check out the Kids Stardom, or when did you then actually start to play?
Well, you know, my parents knew a lot of musicians, so when they dug that I wanted to get into drums, my godfather was Ed Shaughnessy. And Ed Shaughnessy gave me my first drum.
And Ed Shaughnessy was, for people who maybe don't know, was known for the Tonight Show band with Johnny Carson, and not just that, but
he's a great drummer, man. Look him up on YouTube.
One of my first drum clinics when I was 13 was with him.
Ed Shaughnessy.
Yeah.
The mutton chop.
And I still sometimes use some warm-ups that he taught.
So that was my godfather. He gave me the first drum, which
how did they
was a floor tom. And I have a picture of me somewhere.
There's a drum. There's you over here with a drum. Is it that drum?
No, that was at Jack DeJohnette's house, that Indian drum. But somewhere I have. I guess it's not in this room. I don't know where my stuff is. A picture. The first. I can send it to you on the internet. I have it in my D drive.
Okay.
Of me when I was about 10 or 12 or something, playing on Ed's prototype set that Slingerland made him. After a gig, he let me play his drum. And I look at the picture, and I was just a complete beginner, but I look at the body language. It's a still photo, so you don't see the motion, but I look at it and say, and I think even now, yeah, I look like I belong on that. So I look like I'm comfortable, like I'm meant to be there. You know?
Yeah.
So Shaughnessy, eventually I got a whole set from, but first I started just with a tom-tom, I think a floor tom. You
came home from camp and you expressed interest to your parents, and they said, basically, we know the person to talk to, or something like that.
I guess so.
And how did they know?
Remember?
How did they know Ed Shaughnessy?
I'm 74. Yeah. I don't know, but they knew a lot of people. They knew Mundelo was my first great guitar player, composer, was my first kind of harmony teacher. He taught me music. He had me write melody and all the different.
So like theory and
yeah, he had me write.
So you did at some point write like this.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't always by ear.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, I learned pretty early on just where the notes were and the staff, and you know, there was a code, right? Like the lines were every good boy deserves fuzz, and the spaces were face, FACE.
Yeah.
And then I learned sharps and flats.
Yeah.
I knew quarter notes, eighth notes, 16ths, whatever, whole notes. So I started writing when I was 14, and the very first tune I played for you on the piano, it's quite beautiful, and I knew nothing. But my ear would tell me if it sounded right. It took a long time to write that way because I had no knowledge of why something follows something. So I was really just looking and ghosting, but searching. But then when I'd find the next thing, I said, yeah, that goes. So then I'd write it down.
So that was your process. Yeah, would you play it? Would you play that?
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. So we're just going to move the cameras around.
Yeah, sure. And see, I hope I remember it without getting the music out. This is, I think, the very first tune that I wrote. Actually, the very first tune was a kind of a Monk ripoff called Weirdo Waltz that sounded a little bit like, sounded a little bit like All Blues. It had a Monk. But this was like the first serious tune. And it was, teenager. And I didn't know anything, but I except what I knew the names and the notes, where they were, values, four notes, eight notes, rests, and so. Didn't know. I had to write out the harmony because I didn't know chord symbols. Mm-hmm. So I didn't write D minor seventh or something. I wrote out all the notes. Now, if I give it to a real piano player, I use the chord symbols and let them voice it. how they want, but I actually wrote the voicings and everything. Let's see if I remember that one. So good. The first chord, by the way, nobody has ever been able to tell me the name of it, but it sounds good to me. What the word Lydian, but I already liked that sound.
You found that sound, yeah.
I found that sound, and it turns out that when I write chordal tunes, a lot of it is Lydian major. A lot of it, you know. And I never studied George Russell. I knew George Russell, and he wrote 20,000 pages on it. He got the Genius Award, which he deserved. He was a genius. But for me, my Lydian concept is very simple. It's just, it's nice to play a minor blues on a major chord, because with the Lydian, you can do that. You play D flat major. You can do it in the bass. So I just always liked the sound. So even the first tune, but consider I was like 14 or 15. It's a pretty good tune. And sophisticated, but it took a long time. You know? Took a long time. Obviously, I had been hearing Elmo Hope and people like that, so I had some kind of idea of that kind of beauty. When he played the piano, his voicings were just pure beauty. Elmo Hope, someone else if you're not familiar with.
I've heard the name, but I'm not.
Well, he was a pianist composer, and his wife Bertha Hope is also a great pianist, and she's still alive. She's quite old, but she's still kicking. Elmo passed. You know, he had he was another drug problem guy. You know, died young, had a very hard life. But boy, his music was beautiful. There's a record that he's not the leader on. It's but they play a bunch of his compositions called The Fox. That's Harold Land record. That might be the greatest bebop record of all time. Frank Butler.
You turned me on to that, and I got that.
Great masterpiece record, and they play a bunch of Elmo's tunes, which are just great compositions. They weren't easy. Monk's compositions were difficult sometimes, but generally the forms weren't that complicated. 32 bars. Many of them were based on standard progressions. Elmo's music was really 9 bars and 5 bars, and in those days, again, those people to play on those forms.
It's not common.
Not common. So some of his best records are dates without horns. But that was one of the few times where they got horn players to play his stuff like really great. Harold Landon was a young trumpet player named Dupree Bolton, who also was a tragic cat, died young, in and out of jail. But he was like another Clifford Brown type of talent. Or or Booker Little type of talent. And he sounds great on that record.
So Ed Shaughnessy gave you your first drum.
Yes.
And then did he give you a lesson?
How about that?
Sure.
I don't know. I don't think so. I used to follow him around. He did a lot of studio dates. He was recording all the time, and so I would get to go to the sessions. I saw Mondello play, George DeVivier, the great bass player. I saw Doc Severinsen before he was on the leader of the Johnny Carson band, right? And wearing the flamboyant suits and everything. But at that time, he was just a studio trumpet player, not just. That's how he. So I remember meeting him and seeing him play. A lot of the studio musicians, probably still that way, or were great jazz players, but they did the studio thing to make money, playing anything, any kind of date with singers, classical stuff. Shaughnessy. So yeah, I followed Shaughnessy around. I got to see him play a few times.
Did you have a drum teacher at some point?
Hardly. I had a guy named Lee West for a few lessons. And it was funny though, because he showed me the single stroke, the double stroke, and that I got bored with that. So I came and said, well, what if you mix the single and the double? So I was like, and he said, oh, you invented the paradiddle. He said that would have been the next lesson, but I already came to it on my own. And and then I also took a few lessons with Charlie Perry, who wrote a lot of drum books and stuff. And Charlie Perry was really a great cat, really nice cat. But the lessons were, we'd smoke a joint and listen to Roy Haynes records or something. And I realized after a while, I don't really need to pay for this. I could do that on my own. Plus, he was checking out what I was doing, and he was writing out what I was playing. He was transcribing these, because I was coming up at the time with these kind of eighth note flow, but dividing them between the four limbs, stuff like that. Sit there, write out my stuff like he was going to make a book out of it or something. And so I was honored, he's a professional teacher. But at the same time, at a certain point, I said, I don't really need to pay for that,
Yeah.
But I liked him.
You got some foundation stuff, but didn't really need. A lot of it was your self-taught, I guess.
Basically self-taught. I went to a great classical teacher for a minute. This guy named Morris Goldenberg, Mo Goldenberg, and he wrote a book that the classical people are still using, and he taught at Juilliard. And one of my hero mentors, Stanley Free, was another one of the musicians that my parents introduced me to, and he's on the record Bittersweet in the Ozone.
Oh, okay.
Which, by the way, I should mention for those who are watching that all these things are now on Bandcamp. They never were until Bittersweet in the Ozone, with a 25-minute piece featuring Stanley Free, with all these. Eddie Gomez is on that, and Billy Hart, and Dave Liebman, and Randy Brecker. It's a great record, actually. It's one of my early records from '73. And also that song that I played for you, the ballad on the piano, that's recorded on a record called Devotion. With Steve Kuhn, Terry Masahino, Steve Swallow, and Dave Liebman. They did a beautiful version of that with Hino on the muted trumpet, and so that did get recorded for those, and the piano playing way better than what I did on the piano. It's Kuhn on that date, and so these things are now available. My friend, the great bassist Damon Smith, was kind enough to help me get my stuff on Bandcamp, because I'm a computer idiot, and I should have taken advantage of this years ago. And he's got most of them up. I've got 27 records out on Ra Kalam Records, but I think he's got a good number of them, particularly some of the older ones like Devotion and what was the other one I just said? Bittersweet in the Ozone from '73. So anyway, for those who are interested in any Ra Kalam music, including and as new things are done, we'll put them up as well.
Yeah, you're constantly creating music. So how were you connected with Mingus, with Charles Mingus?
Well, there's another one that my dad knew.
Did your dad did some publicist work or what?
Yeah. He was on the scene even before I was born. I mean, him and my mom they were hanging out on 52nd Street, and they heard all the people. They heard Art Tatum and Burton.
So they were into
they knew all those people. They knew everybody. Red Fox. They knew. They met. My dad knew Malcolm X when he was Detroit Red.
Wow.
He was just a gangster.
Uh-huh.
He was early Malcolm X was a gangster. Detroit Red. It's in the movie. It's in his life story.
Yeah.
Hustler. But they were all on the scene, and my mom and dad were. He did some work for Stan Kenton, which interestingly enough, Stan Kenton had a very unusual creative big band. Later, Shelly Manne played with them.
Uh-huh.
And before that, Stan Levy, who's one of the great drummers of all time, another Jew with rhythm. Stan Levy is an interesting cat because his first gig that he ever did, was with Dizzy Gillespie.
Wow.
He was a 19-year-old white kid, and Dizzy chose him to play. And people questioned him. He said, "No, just listen to him play. He's ready." And he was, especially for the swing and the bebop. But he became a studio drummer too later, Stan Levy.
So your education.
And he played with Kenton's band too. And the thing is, there's a documentary about that, which I do recommend.
What's it called?
Stan Levy era with Stan Kenton.
Okay.
If you check Stan Levy and then Stan Kenton, you'll find it.
That, yeah.
And it's really interesting because Kenton's band, the writing was very beautiful and creative and advanced. Some of the most creative big band. He had some of the best writers, but they weren't known for swinging.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to hear swing, you Count Basie or Duke Ellington, for swing. But when Stan Levy joined the band, the Kenton band started to swing like crazy. One guy changed the whole band. Plus, he started bringing in great improvisers. I think Lee Konitz played. That's a great cat who passed. Art Pepper, Conti Candoli, all these great great jazz players. Joined Kenton's band, and Kenton's band still had these great arrangements, his Wagnerian arrangements with brass and all, but they started to swing like crazy. It's amazing to hear the difference. And Shelly too. Shelly also made the band swing, but Stan Levy is like one of the greatest drummers. There's a nice little video with him with Charlie Watts, and Charlie Watts came to visit him.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, mutual respect.
From the Rolling Stones.
The Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
But Charlie knew,
he loved, I guess, big bands.
Oh, he loved jazz and jazz lover, but he loved great drumming, so he recognized Stan Levy.
So your parents knew Charles Mingus.
Yeah.
You were getting into music.
Rahsaan, although he wasn't even Rahsaan in those days.
So
just Roland,
would
Kirk.
Charles Mingus come over to your house
all the time?
And so you have your drum set up, and so was he like a little bit? Let's play a little bit, or how did it?
Yeah, he used to play duets with me. He would play piano.
He played piano. Okay.
Yeah, he was a hell of a piano. He made a solo piano record, and one of the tunes on it is called Meditations for Moses, which was for my dad, because my dad helped him through that, held his hand. He was apprehensive about it because Mingus was world-class bass player, but he was a little shy about his piano playing because he would say, Art Tatum, solo piano, Art Tatum, okay. Yeah. But Mingus was great, and he was going through some anxiety, so my dad, kind of helped him get through that. So he made, I think it was a spontaneous improvisation. It's really a good record called Mingus on Piano. I was actually there for when we brought Roland Kirk to audition for Mingus. We drove Roland across the park. Mingus lived on Fifth Avenue. We lived on Central Park West, the other side of Central Park. And Mingus wanted to live on Fifth Avenue because he felt that was a place that black people weren't allowed to live in. It was all, at that time, 10% rich white peeps. Yeah. And because he didn't think they would even rent to him, my dad signed the lease for Mingus, pretended to be Mingus, signed his name so he could get this apartment on Fifth Avenue. And we drove across the park. We took Roland. Of course, he wanted to drive, but he was blind, so we didn't let him. And we took him there, and that was talk about meeting of the Titans. That was beautiful to be there to see that.
So you were there the first time they met.
Yes.
And so, what was your relationship like with Mingus? And what I mean, I know you've mentioned that he told you to play, to learn to play dirty, or not dirty, to play loose. Or,
yeah, he said to me at one point, I was 13 or 14. He said, Bobby, you got to learn how to play sloppy, man. You don't want to be one of them white studio drummers, I think now Mingus, you had nothing to worry about. And I respect all studio drummers, whatever their skin color is, because there's a level of perfection, and they have to, because in the studio, time is money, But I've never had that kind of perfection. So but I remember arguing with him, saying, "But Mingus, man, I'm 13. I don't even know how to play clean yet. You're telling me to play sloppy." And he got a kick out of the fact that this young kid would argue with him, But years later, I come to understand totally what he means, and it's sometimes that's why classical people have a hard time playing jazz or funk or any kind of African-derived music, because they're not loose enough. They're taught to be so perfect and so correct, and so that I think the music needs to be a little effed up to sound good, and so sloppy. It's easy to be sloppy when you don't practice much, which is unfortunately my kind of my MO. I don't practice nearly as much as I should. I like to play with people, and here in Memphis, I hardly ever get to play with people. Usually have to go all the way to Europe to play with people and play for an audience. I hardly ever play in the States. So, my chops are always kind of down a little bit. And that's I'm not recommending that. I'm not proud of that or anything. But I think, I understand what Mingus was talking about. There's a looseness or a sloppiness, and even the best, let's say, time drummers, there's an organic quality to it. There's a loose organic quality to it. That's what makes it better. You don't want to hear 16th notes like you want to hear
more musical.
Yeah, a little more messed up.
Yeah,
more sloppy.
Human.
Yeah, human, organic.
Yeah,
organic.
So that must have been a huge part of your music education at a young age, to be jamming with me.
I used to sit in with him, man, because he had a gig at a club in New York.
Was Danny Gottlieb the drummer at the time?
Yeah. Yeah, his basic quartet was Dolphy, Ted Kurson, Danny Richmond, and Mingus, although they would have other people. It was called the Jazz Workshop. So sometimes you'd have a 10-piece band. Booker Irvin would show up, John Handy, Jackie Byard, but basically it was always a quartet. They played for a whole year in this club, and I only could go on the weekends because that was on the Sunday.
How old were you around?
13, 14.
Okay. And you're sitting in at a club at a young age.
Yeah, on the Sunday they didn't serve booze, so they let me in because the rest of the week I couldn't get in. I was too young for places that sell alcohol. So I went there I saw Mingus every Sunday for a year, and he would always let me play. They were very nice, and
So you play with Dolphy and all those guys?
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could have done it now. I mean, I wish I could have done it when I was grown up.
But still, that's the best sort of music education I can imagine, to play with masters. I mean, at such a young age.
Well, one thing, that I learned right away is that I won't lie, I was scared. Right? Sitting there with Mingus, man. Yeah. And I never took my eyes off the dude when I played. And I notice now, some of the young people, they seem to be scared of me, even though, I'm a nice guy, Clifford. Man.
Yeah.
I'll be truthful with people, but always from the heart. Never try to hurt anybody. If anything, I'm trying to build people up.
Well, I think having honest observations is valuable. But go on.
I think so. But now I notice that people don't look at me. Like they're afraid to look or something. And man, if you're in with somebody that's over your head or better than, man, I just knew right away. Same when I played with Rahsaan or Roland. I never took my eyes off them because I was letting them lead me and correct me by what they were playing. They would show me if I was dragging, hey, come on, man, or whatever it was, so. Or with Mingus, he used to change his stuff up a lot. I mean, he'd catch his own guys off guard.
It's like taking your eye off the conductor, if you sort of.
Yeah, but even worse in a way, because with the conductor, at least you have a score. This, you didn't know what he was going to do.
Yeah.
Mingus would change tunes in the middle, change tempos. A lot of his arrangements went from one vibe to another, but you didn't know when it was going to happen. It was totally spontaneous. He would just call it right on the spot. And most of the jazz musicians were like that. It was Sonny Rollins used to switch tunes in the middle of a tune. He would play 8 tunes without finishing one of them.
Did you know him?
I sat in with him once. I knew him a little. I didn't really know him.
What were the circumstances when you sat with him?
Man, you know who the drummer was? I think it was Frankie Dunlap, one of my favorite drummers, and I love Frankie Dunlap. So I used to, he
played with Dizzy also?
He played with Monk.
Oh yeah. Okay.
He might have played with Dizzy. He's a great drummer. I don't know his whole history, but he was playing with Sonny Rollins, and he asked me if I wanted to play. I think he wanted to take a break or talk to a girl or get a drink or something. And I said absolutely. And it was also Freddie Hubbard was sitting in at the same. So it was Sonny, Freddie Hubbard, Walter Booker was the bass player. I think also Robert Hayes, Louis Hayes, a great drummer's brother, played alto. So it was 3 horns. And if I remember, we played Bo Bee Bee Boo Boo Dee Today Ba 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 Today Go Green Dolphin Street. And they played a long time, which showed me they must have liked my drumming, because if they didn't like the drumming, they wouldn't keep going, And I remember Sonny said something after, "Good job, young man. Sounded good, young man." And what also, Doug, was at first they didn't seem to realize that there was a different drummer, which made me really feel good. If you mistake me for Frankie Dunlap, that's a great compliment. I was just a kid,
Yeah. It
was like, not right away, not too far in, but like a minute or two, like they turned around. Oh, you got a different guy, And so that was cool. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Great treat. So I haven't had the experience. I saw Sonny play a lot, and he also used to change his band a lot. And I know each one sounded great to me. They have a different rhythm section. They all sounded great to me, but for some reason, and I think maybe if they were slow to catch his changes, because he literally would change keys, and he would sometimes walk into the kitchen and play, and then it's hard to hear him, but you had to still.
So was that an example of him being a free player with a rhythm section that was maybe a little bit more in form?
Well, I would say I don't know if free, but really in the moment, and nothing planned. Put it that way, totally in the moment, and fearless. And the cats used to play that way, man. They change tempos. They try anything on standards. It wasn't. Now it's gotten a lot more fear-based, and people want to play it safe. I always used to crack me up when sometimes I would do a gig with some young peeps of students, and we're rehearsing for a gig that's 2 weeks, and they say, "You want a solo on this tune?" I go, "Man, how do I know? That's 2 weeks from now." I mean, how hard is it to just look at me and go, "You want to play?"
You want to know in the moment.
Or no. I mean, they don't even that much. They're afraid of even that much spontaneous communication. They want to work it all out beforehand. And I think if we're honest about that, that's all fear-based, and because they want to be safe. We know we got it worked out. We got this beautiful arrangement, and we know how we're going to play it, and we know what we're going to do. And that wasn't the vibe of jazz at all. That's one reason why jazz appealed to me, was you never knew what was going to happen. And so, and I also think in general, fear is a detriment to all. I mean, I can sympathize, I can empathize with it. I've been afraid at times, but my reaction to the fear was completely different. Instead of not looking at the person, I totally. I mean, if you got in the ring with Mike Tyson, are you going to take your eyes off the dude? Yeah. I'd be watching. As soon as he got close, I'd be like, no. You know. But I'm definitely not going to ignore somebody that I'm afraid of.
So you were facing the fear.
I wanted, you know, to me, first of all, those cats would kick you right off if you did that. If you ignored what they were doing with signals, I mean, you wouldn't even make it through the first two. They weren't having that.
They just stopped playing.
They'd kick you off. They'd say, get off. Man, Mingus fired a guy on one chord. This is a true story. He was in San Francisco, and they hired a band for him. And this was supposed to be the best piano player in San Francisco. He was all excited to play with Mingus. And they started playing it too, and he hit one chord, and Mingus said, stop, you're fired.
Wow.
One chord.
That's intense.
He hit the point of no return, like immediately. So
I wonder what chord that was.
Yeah, me too. But I guess it was really the wrong chord, man.
Maybe it was just a half step off or something.
Oh, Miles, they all do that shit. They were very tough, man. Rahsaan they were brutal because they grew up that way. They were challenged that way. And I'm not necessarily for that. I mean, I'm just saying that. But as a, you know, that would be whenever I'm playing. Actually, the truth is, if I'm playing, when I was younger, everybody I played with was over my head. Was better, and that was. But they
probably go. He's a kid, so they probably would go a little bit easier on you, maybe.
Not necessarily. It depends on who we're talking about. But then also later, as I'm an elder, and a lot of times I'm playing with people much younger than me and not strong as I am, I still watch them 100%. Not so much from what I can learn, although maybe, but how I can help. If a guy's slowing down, I'm going to push him. If he's rushing, I'm going to send out relaxed vibe. If everything is down low, I'm going to play some high shit.
Yeah.
If everything is all up high, I'm going to play some low shit.
You want to balance it out.
I want to add to whatever I'm going to. Yeah, I need to know, in order to know what to play, I have to totally hear the other person.
Yeah. And
so I've always recommend that, but a lot of the new generation don't do that. They don't look at you. They don't. Looking is not as important. Listen, it's by ear, but looking doesn't hurt. And I remember when Jaco played, he looked at me like the whole time, man. He was like on me, like, you know. He never looked at his hands. He was like looking at the drums. You know, if I moved a half inch, he would catch that shit. You know, this is Swallow, same thing. All the great bass players.
That video that I was saying, I just saw where you're playing with Gary Burton, Pat Metheny, Mick Goodrich, and Steve Swallow. He has his mouth open and he's just.
He's the kid of me. He said, "Man, you're gonna catch some flies."
Yeah, I think that's what my friend said. The exact same thing.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Could be.
So. You had mentioned two things when my first lessons with you. One was about the resolution points, that there's a balance to them. Like if you're hitting a downbeat, there might be a certain number of upbeats, or and then also that a lot of tunes have a natural sort of clave pattern, not necessarily clave, but a rhythmic pattern.
They have resolution points. Although that again, I would say that's not an exact science.
Yeah,
it's how you interpret the tune. But again, and this is also part of the thing of music that a lot of the young people haven't even discovered, let alone mastered or went into it deep. And this is, you know, the communication. One of my pet peeves is if you're playing a standard, which I almost never do anymore. But when the bass player starts playing just walking, it's like, man, I'm playing the song. I'm playing the shape of the song. Almost all add and forth. Not like they have to hit everyone with me, but at least tune in. Occasionally meet me on the big hits. That's how the Cats played. You hear Elvin and Jimmy Garrison. You know, I mean, it could be walking sometimes, but there's a lot of hits in the song. And that one that I was singing, Stella by Starlight, that's a good example that it is not an exact science, because what I was singing mostly and the four. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, 3, 4, and 2, 3, and but if you play that with someone who's not a jazz player, more like a legit classical or Broadway kind of show, it's all going to be on them. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And on the one, and that's how it's written, because it's not a jazz tune. I think it's a movie song, actually. So that's to show that it is interpretational, obviously. There's no, you know, my way is not necessarily the Greenwich Standard correct way, but I notice when I play with the people who really speak the language of jazz, we do come to a very high level of agreement about where the big hits, where the resolution points are. Which also goes back to my point, which most of the students don't want to hear, is before you're ready to play a standard, they go right to jazz. Can you just improvise on one hit in 2 bars? And most of them can't. So if you can't improvise on one hit in 2 bars, how are you going to improvise on 25 hits in 32 bars?
Yeah.
Well, they don't even think about it. They completely abdicate on that aspect, because music may have a harmonic form, has a melodic form, but also has a rhythmic form.
Would you mind giving another example of a song with the kind of illustrating the hit points with the singing and then on the drums?
Sure. Well, you know, one of the easiest ones, and also because it's written by a jazz guy, is Blue Bossa. First of all, it's only 16, and it's pretty much the same figure all the way, except just at the end it changes. So I'll clap what I hear the clave or resolution point to be. Same. Now it changes. 1, 2, 3, 4, back to the top. Yeah, I'm just playing the song. You know, I'm playing the song.
Yeah. So, would you give a tour of your drums? Would you talk about this setup that you have? I'm gonna take this camera and just move it, hopefully without pulling any cords out, so we can get a little closer.
Oh, you're gonna go like freeform.
Handheld.
Handheld. I love it. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Here we go. No cord. Stay. Okay. All right.
Maybe I should clear a little space here.
Okay, so I'm just going to so you can see there's a djembe there, and then there's another drum here. Cool design. That design, did you draw that design?
Sure.
That's cool.
Sure. Well, I inherited the artistic gift from my mom and her side of the family. My son has it too. That's his painting, by the way. That's a chalk, actually. He did that when he was 14, Ghostface Killer.
14. And then your mom did this painting behind you here.
Yeah.
And you said this one was maybe one of her first?
That one was one of her
Oh, that was one of her, this one was one of her first?
Yeah.
This one. And then there's also this one that was behind.
Yeah, behind the chorus. Yeah.
So will you talk about the concept behind your set as well?
Well,
it's like different zones, right?
What's that?
Zones?
Zones, sure. Sure, we were talking about martial arts movies last night. I was telling you on to Tony Jaa, Ong Bak, the Muay Thai kid. I get a lot. I enjoy those movies, you know.
Yeah.
And he's amazing. But also, you know, obviously I watched all the Ip Man movies with Donnie Yen, and the Ip Man, who is Bruce Lee's teacher, the style that he teaches is called Wing Chun, and it's all right down the center. Everything, because when you think about it, the stuff you need to protect most is in the center, like here and here, and also, so there's not moves like this. Everything is right down here. So I have the Wing Chun vibe, which is. Zone, maybe use this cat. Towards the left, I got some other things happening over here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sometimes it's all just cymbals and gongs. Yeah, I mean, you know, try different zones. I got into something recently when I was in Portugal, and they booked me to do 3 solo concerts. I never do solo concerts. I never felt equipped to do solo concerts. Like, to me, that's a long time to play by myself, you know. So I was trying to come up with some new stuff, and one thing that I hadn't played before was maybe I did, but I don't remember. It was using my left hand to turn the snare on and off. So that means I only have one hand, which it was kind of cool because it slows me down. I can't play all the fast shit with one hand, but I can get stuff. I'll use the feet. I got a few minutes out of that.
Yeah, I like how you use this. It sounds like that. My brother Joe was just asking, have you ever been starstruck?
Ever been starstruck?
Like you met somebody that just was like maybe left you speechless, or like hard with someone you admired, maybe. Or how did you react to meeting someone that was maybe someone who you put on a really high, like on a pedestal?
Well, that's a good question. I remember Coltrane smiled at me one time, and that felt like the sun coming out, because I think he acknowledged me because he'd seen me. I came to all his gigs, so he knew that was crazy young white kids at all my gigs. And we happened to lock eyes through the window at the half note, and he smiled and nodded at me, and I said, "Wow."
Was he playing, or was he just?
He was just sitting on the steps. Not at that moment. And he smiled at me. He wasn't. But he was playing at the club, but he was sitting on the steps, like going up to the bands, and I was looking through the window, looking at him. He saw me and he smiled at me. I was on a plane once going to Seattle, I think, and one of these Tibetan spiritual masters, a Rinpoche cat, was sitting right across the aisle from me, and he had that vibe too. He just looked at me and smiled, and the sun came up, man. It was like a very powerful presence. Just the smile was worth a lot. He didn't have to speak to me or anything. And then, of course, I always feel that way about Tuskegee, my teacher. He's the person I'm most in awe of, and I've known him for over 40 years. But it's still like I can't believe it when I'm with him. But it's good if you're playing with somebody that you don't feel too overawed. In other words, you have to come, at least you have to try to be equal, even if you maybe not be equal, and that way you get raised up. In other words, you can't go in timid, like, oh, I don't deserve to be here, or I'm in over my head, or something like that. I've seen people act that way with me, and I tell them no. I say, well, first of all, I say, if you're unsure, just don't play. Yeah. But when you do come in strong, like you believe it, you mean it, like you're confident. Yeah. And if you're not, don't feel that way, then don't play.
So had you thought of approaching Coltrane at one of the shows during a break or anything, or was it sort of?
No, I didn't want to disturb him, man. He seemed so into his mission that to me, to say, hello, Mr. Coltrane, I love your music. It's like.
So he
knew it. He knew I loved his music.
Being there was enough.
I was there every night. He eventually recognized me. I used to go with Dave Liebman. We used to sit at the bar, and they played on top of the bar. We'd eat veal parmesan sandwiches and drink a Coke and watch.
And this was with Elvin,
McCoy, and Garrison. Yeah. I saw that band play like hundreds of times.
I met McCoy one time, and I asked him. I asked him, I was doing this, I asked him, what is the groove? And he looked at me like, kind of like, what is this question? And then someone whisked him away.
Oh, okay. What's the question? What is
the groove to
What
you?
is the groove?
Or what is a groove to you?
It's such an open-ended question.
It is.
You know, so
Yeah. Well, what is rhythm?
what is rhythm? Oh. Yeah, that's.
Those are the answers can, they could be, it could be a deep question.
Well, rhythm is infinite, you know, and it's good for people to realize it, because one thing I've noticed since I've been in Tennessee, it's great music tradition here, and so much great music has come from here, both the R&B and the country and the blues and the country music and rockabilly and all this stuff. But I've only heard like 2 rhythms basically. I hear like boom, bat, boom, boom, bat, boom, bat, which by the way is when it's played great. That's great. Mm-hmm. And when I hear people playing jazz, I hear the ding, 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 and man, you know, rhythm is infinite, man. And once you start getting into the infinity of rhythm, right, it's it really is infinite. So now, if you want to specialize in certain rhythms, that's okay. You know, different culture music is good. You know, but rhythm is, it's probably the most important element in the music, because I've always said to be a great singer, you have to be a great drummer. Mm-hmm. To be a great saxophone player, you have to be a great drummer. And when I say great drummer, I don't mean Buddy Rich chops, which I don't have. Mm-hmm. But I have the drum concept. Mm-hmm. It's the drum concept. Whenever one of the most beautiful ballad performances ever is Mel Torme singing Stardust. It's a live gig in Japan with Frank West. I mean, his phrasing is just impeccable. And sure enough, Mel is a hell of a drummer. I mean, he actually had some chops on the drum. Mm-hmm. In fact, there's a video of him battling Buddy Rich and kind of holding his own. Mm-hmm. He's a great piano player too. Yeah, he's an underrated, brilliant musician. He wrote the one Christmas song that I like, actually. Chestnuts roasted.
Oh, he wrote that.
Yeah, it's Mel Torme.
And Sammy Davis Jr. was a great drummer too.
Oh, for sure, big time.
Yeah,
big time.
Dancer and everything.
Tap dancers are drummers, but with their feet, man, they just they're all great drummers. But the singers, the melody people, because Frank Sinatra was a great drummer, Coltrane was a great drummer, Ravi Coltrane is a great drummer. Any of these guys who are great horn players are great drummers. Again, conceptually. The Metheny is a great drummer.
And actually on the drums.
Well, I don't know. Probably he would be if he felt the need to do it. But you could
feel it rhythmically in the way that.
Man, I came to his loft one time. He had this place out in, somewhere outside of Boston, a warehouse somewhere. I forget the town, and they were doing a tune. It sounded like a 10-piece band in there, and the door was locked, so I couldn't get in until the tune ended. So I'm sitting out there just listening. And the drums was like unbelievable. It was like drumming, and it sounded like airto and percussion. I came in, he had programmed all of it. He was the only guy in the room. And the drum shit was phenomenal. And with all due respect to all his drummers, it was better than any of the cats who actually played drums with him. What he had programmed on the drums, plus he's Metheny, so he had samples of Jack DeJohnette's cymbal and Jack DeJohnette's snare, and probably had Airto's percussion, because he knew all those cats. Yeah. He had the synclavier. He could sample anything. So when he made a drum part, they were made of like the beautiful sounds, but it wasn't just the sounds, it was what he was playing. It was actually, it's the irony is the drummers who play with him don't get to play that free usually, because they got to play Pat's arrangement. But when he did the drum arrangement, the drums were really wild, really open. And anyway, it didn't surprise me, because just knowing when I hear him play, his drum awareness really high. People that one of his strongest things. I mean, he's a great guitar player, great melody man, great composer, but his rhythm is really strong. And when I go back and rewatch some of his stuff, it strikes me just how strong rhythmically he is, man. Definitely.
How did you meet him?
Through Gary Burton.
So you were playing in Gary Burton's group? And did he bring him into the group?
Yeah, this young kid's going to play in the band.
And so did you know anything about him at that time?
No, just that he was a young kid that's super talented.
You'd never heard him or anything?
He was from Missouri, Lee Summit, Missouri.
So he moved to town, and Gary Burton says this kid's going to join us.
Well, he wasn't living in Missouri at that time. I think he was.
He moved in. Oh, okay.
He lived in Boston. He was in Florida for a while. That's where he met Jaco. I think he's doing something at the University of Miami. Maybe he studied there. I don't know. So
he's the youngest person in the group, and he came in. And what was his vibe like? How did that change the group?
Well, he was kind of, at that point, you could say maybe he was just another color. He was kind of the least important one in the group because Mick Goodrick was taking almost all the solos. Mm-hmm. Pat was playing 12-string guitar, which just kind of filled up. So it's more atmospheric. He did solo a little bit, but it was mostly Mick. So, but just having the 12-string, it just added kind of density to the harmonies and to thicken the stew in a way. So he was kind of an adjunct, but even then he had his own thing, and he was, when he started to do gigs as a leader with it, and he was writing all the time. And he's as much of a music fanatic as anybody I know. I mean, I'm not anything like that. I have other interests besides this guy. He'd come home from the gig and write 6 tunes. He'd be walking down the hotel lobby with the guitar on, not using the right hand, just practicing left hand stuff, intervals and stuff. So he never took the guitar off. Yeah. And he was the kind of guy that there's a YouTube of me playing with him in Swallow in Montreal from '88, and he had been playing every day for like a whole year, traveling. He had one day off and he couldn't stand it. So he booked the gig and called me, and I was happy to do it. That was his one day off.
And you probably hadn't played with him in a while.
No. There's a couple of tunes from there on YouTube. There's a very blistering version of All the Things You Are. He plays his ass off, and I solo on that. And also a Brazilian tune, How Insensitive. And also that Herbie Hancock, Cantaloupe Island.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's funky. He's funky. He's soulful. He's soulful. Yeah.
And so, and then he introduced you to Jaco, or did you already know Jaco?
No, Pat introduced me. I didn't know Jaco.
And so what were the circumstances to bring the two of you together?
He came up from Florida to do some trio gigs,
Were you already playing in a group, in Pat's group? Or? I
don't remember. That might have been that's a good question, man. You're talking about 1973 or 74. I think that started, as far as playing with him as a leader, I think Jaco was in from the get-go. I don't think I did any other gigs. I may have with different bass players. But
what were your first impressions of Jaco?
Oh, man, it's like what I said in the interview that didn't make it in the documentary. They came and interviewed me for that Jaco documentary, but I knew it wasn't going to make much because they got Joni Mitchell and Herbie Hancock and Wayne Short, all these famous people. So, but they did I think I said something like it's like jumping out of an airplane at night naked on LSD. that was the vibe.
Playing with him or knowing him?
Both. First, just playing with him, man. He was flying, man. And I do remember one thing. I think, again, my memory could be off on this. I wonder if Pat remembers. But the first tune we were going to play, I never heard this guy. I could tell he was a character. He was goofy. He was a goofy cat, man. But super athletic, man. He was in shape, and just sweet but goofy. And straight too, like no drugs, no drinking, nothing. And I had a photographic memory, but I had never heard him play. And Pat called All the Things You Are, and Jaco said, "You got a chart on that?" And I thought, "You need a chart on All the Things You Are?" Every jazz guy knows that tune because it's the cycle of fourths kind of thing, cycle of fifths, whatever. I thought, oh shit, we're in trouble. He doesn't even know that. So Pat said, yeah, I got it in the real book. And he put it on, and Jaco glanced at it for a second. It's like, whoa. Like, he played that song better, far better than anybody ever heard it. And he just, one time. So I realized, and he just glanced at the music, and it was already memorized, you know.
Mm.
And I said, okay, this guy's got it in his DNA. What takes most people 20 years, 30 years, he already has it.
Mm-hmm.
It's already there. And for whatever reason. You know?
So he wasn't necessarily a jazz musician at that point.
Well, he didn't know all the things you are.
Yeah, yeah. So he
I mean, he was a jazz musician, but he played R&B. He played with Wayne Cochran. That was his most famous gig. He did like R&B studio dates. He was a show drummer too. He used to play behind Sammy Davis Jr. and Tony Bennett and stuff. He also played with his, because they had
drum set.
What's that?
You said show drummer.
No, he played bass.
Okay.
He probably could have played drums. He's that good on drums too. But and his dad was a singer in the Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett style.
So he came from a musical family.
And they used to do like duets, where this is interesting too, because and the dad would play brushes on the cymbal. And every time it rained, it rained. No piano, no guitar. So that's when Jaco started getting all his harmonics. Mm-hmm. So he was playing bass line, but he also was playing chords, and he was filling it up in a way that almost no bass player would, you know.
Yeah.
And he also played swing, old style swing, not hip Jack DeJohnette swing, but Frank Sinatra swing with his dad, which is also, you know, there's been some debates. I see these kind of Facebook debates. You know, they're conversations. People weigh in and put their 2 cents in about whether you can really play jazz or really swing on the electric bass. Mm-hmm. You know? And Gomez said a great thing. You know, he said, man, the only difference is you can't bow. Mm-hmm. So I think if you have a swing concept, it don't matter. But Jaco was one of the, and as evidence that you could really swing on electric bass, they played some tracks of me and Metheny and Jaco live at this, that kids had recorded against our will with tape machines under the table, mm-hmm. which at the time I would have said, don't do it. But now I'm kind of glad that they did, because
there's a record of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you hear us playing. And I remember just playing Metheny tunes, but it wasn't like that. We played and Jaco swinging like a motherfucker, mm-hmm. and taking chances too. Both him and Metheny. We played the standards, but we didn't play them standard. Mm-hmm. We didn't play them stock in any way. They were pushing the boundaries, but definitely swinging. Mm-hmm. Jaco is swinging. Steve Swallow is swinging hard, can swing hard on the electric bass. Yeah. But you need the concept. One of the things that I see is that the thing about the electric bass is that the notes ring too long. The amps are so strong. So the acoustic bass back in the day, if you wanted the note to last, you had to pull it really hard. With the electric, like and it's
sustains longer.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. So if you're going to play electric, you have to have a way of dampening. Yeah. So not all the notes, but when you want a long one, you let it ring. But when you want a short, and I think Jaco had a way. I don't know what his way was, but he dampened sometimes.
Yeah, my friend who's a bass player, my Italian friend Gianluca, who's in Nashville, he said, oh geez, I'm so relieved that even Jaco needed some charts,
yeah, but for about a half a second.
For about half a second, and then also. He said, yes, what is the groove versus rhythm? I was about to ask. He was, so like, if you were talking about rhythm being infinite, what is a groove, or what is the groove?
Well, you know, I guess it depends on who's...
Is it separate is it different from rhythm?
Well, the word groove connotes to me time. Mm-hmm. Rhythm doesn't have to be in time. In other words, the area of rhythm that I enjoy the most now is rubato.
Mm-hmm. So no bar stretch
line. The way that I write songs now, no bar lines. So it's rubato. And I, as a rhythmatist, I feel that's a natural evolution, because a rubato is or put it this way, it's the least mechanical of all rhythms, in the sense that it's the least in the past. As soon as you start playing one of these standard grooves, you're playing something very similar to something that's been played thousands of times.
Yeah.
So you have this history with it. When you're playing rubato, it's kind of, so you kind of almost know what you're going to play. Whereas with rubato, you don't know at all. And to me, that's exciting. For certain people, again, I think the fear factor has a lot to do with it. But with some people, and most listeners too, they're more comfortable hearing things that they know, that they recognize, that they're familiar with. What gets me high is to play what I don't know and what can't be understood with the rational mind, can't be transcribed or anything. But groove generally is some kind of a repetition. And I still work on grooves, and I still, danceable or swing, something that's in time.
What about relationship wise? Is a groove the relationship between different sounds, or?
Well, that's part of it. I mean, with drumming, most rhythm, which includes groove, we can say groove is rhythm, but then there's rhythms that may not be called a groove, You're basically dealing with two sounds, a low sound and a high sound. You got your boom and your back, tick boom, boom, back, tick boom, back, tick back, back, boom, back, back. Now, tom-toms give you gradation, but your basic meat and potato rhythm is the low sound and the high sound, which is why in cultures that play only a single drum, like like djembe, they got the low. You got the high, the bay, djembe, boom, back, boom, back, boom, back, boom, back. Right? So of course you can get gradations, but that's the primary phrasing of rhythm, is the low to the high. The ride is the sustain. It keeps the flow of time.
Yeah.
But the actual figures generally created between the bass and the snare, or the hip hop is saying the boom and the bap.
Yeah.
So groove, to me, I mean, you want to work on grooves, work on those resolution points. I mean, I have a groove that, let's say, I guess you'd call it a groove, that is sort of it's in my DNA, let's say. It's kind of in my core. It's a core rhythm, and it's actually a 6. And I've just been hearing 6 as long as I can remember. And of course, every time it's a variation on it. It's going to be a little different, but it's basically like back to it, biggity, back, biggity, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, back to get to big, get to on to edit. That's just a natural rhythm to me, and I've written a bunch of songs in 6, and other musicians who are intuitive have given me songs in 6 without me. I didn't say, "Hey, my shit is 6, give me a tune in 6." Somehow they knew it, or they felt it. And one of the first, maybe the first recording I did, certainly one of the earliest ones, is the record with Larry Coryell called Lady Coryell, and the title tune is in 6. Great composition, is in 6. More of a swing, so more like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And Emily Remler is also a great guitar player who passed too young, tragically. She wrote a tune for me called Mozambique, which is on YouTube. That's a 6. I was using my talking drum. That's the early 80s, and she wrote it to. Although the bridge goes into 4/4 swing, but most of the tune is a 6/4 kind of African Latin thing.
Yeah.
And with Gomez on bass, John Dirth on trumpet, and that's a nice tune, man. And she was thinking about me to feature me, and that's when she wrote a tune in 6. And I didn't ask her to do it, but for some reason that's a very natural rhythm to me. I guess you'd call it a groove, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all kinds of grooves. You can put the funk groove, you know. Since I've been down south, I've been hearing things that I would call a groove. A musician came over here one time and said, "Oh yeah, but that's not Memphis. That's more New Orleans." So I guess New Orleans is pretty close. I guess the groove is floating over in the you know the airwaves or something, the spirit airwaves, which is how I get a lot of my ideas. They're just in the air, either from the future, from the past, from different cultures. But I've been hearing a rhythm that's and since I got down south, it's slower than I usually go. It's something southern about it, something like moist and humid and swampy, and it's got some, I guess, delta vibe. It's something like it's a funk groove, I guess you'd call it funk, whatever you want to call it, something like bang, baby, ooh, ooh. It's like that, which I guess you'd say is more cross the bar.
Mm-hmm.
The guy came and said, "Oh, that's not Memphis. Memphis, we got to have the backbeat." And you see, there's no steady backbeat. I might hit one backbeat, but I'm not playing every backbeat. I'm hitting all over the you know, but I think it's funky.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my concept of funk is probably more relative to Latin music, which is cross the bar stuff, right?
Yeah.
You know, back, bang, to bang, bang, to bang, you do hear that in New Orleans music. Definitely hear that in the funky meters and the drummers like Russell Baptiste and Zigaboo and Mean Willie Green, all those guys that play with the Neville Brothers and those kind of drummers. Vidakovich got that thing going, and kind of cross the bar funk. But it's interesting when they want to cross over, like sell a lot of records, they go straight backbeat. It's almost like they don't trust Americans to be able to hear a more complicated rhythm.
Yeah. So we've gone longer than usual, but really enjoyed talking with you, and I always enjoy spending time with you. I just have one more question, and thank you for the time you've spent with me. How have you? What is something that's never changed about you, and how are some ways you have changed?
Oh, geez, that's a very good question. Well, definitely, thanks to Tuskegee and my long-term association with this great guru, who also is the strongest guitarist musician I've ever played with, I've definitely become, less egoic, less macho, less neurotic. Not all the way there. I'm still working on, getting rid of my karmic darknesses and hang-ups. But definitely since I came to Tuskegee for spiritual practice, I'm more, at peace, more in the selfless zone. Certainly freer in terms of how I live and how I play, that's I've been able to shed a lot of pain and self-created pain and suffering. So these days, I got my physical issues at the moment, but you've been around me, man. I'm the same happy cat, right? I'm not in any way. I don't get depressed or down or angry anymore. I used to be very angry. In fact, Tuskegee told me I was one of the angriest people he ever met, which is.
I haven't seen that side of you.
Yeah, well, you won't. You won't. You'd have to go way back in the time machine. But and the thing is, I've known certain people who are political people who are like this. In a certain way, I'm not trying to justify it because I don't think it was a good thing to be so angry, but. It can be a form of love because they're angry at all the injustice in the world. I always was. It wasn't just stuff that was done to me. Oh, people mess with me sometimes, make you angry.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't like it when anybody was messed with. I didn't like any kind of racism or ageism or sexism.
Mm-hmm.
And we know there's a lot of that in the world, you know, a lot of evil, nasty, stupid, greedy, negative stuff. So if you want to, you could be angry 24/7. There's plenty of stuff to be angry about.
Yeah.
If you choose to. I don't find it serves any purpose at this point. In fact, I'm not letting that emotion in really anymore. But I know some people who are like that, who are actually really good people. And their anger is, for them, it is a form of love in a way, you know. When I was in school, I was the bully buster.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't bully me.
Mm-hmm.
They picked the weakest.
Yeah.
They picked the kid who had the hair lip and the thick glasses and walking with a boot on his foot or something. And, you know, they would take his hat or something. They wouldn't give it back. Give me back my hat. And they would toss it to their buddy. And I'd go up to the biggest dude, who was often like this much taller than me, and say, give him his hat back now.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Oh, yeah, or what? Or what? I said, I'll put you in the hospital. You want to try me? Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd even say, come on, man. I push him. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
You want to try me? Let's go. And I was fearless, man.
Mm-hmm.
And that used to bug me. But I also was smart enough, too. You know, later I met some kids that you definitely would want to mess with. But, you know, these are kids that are more or less on my level. And I didn't, you know. But again, you know, that was me. And so when I first met Tuskegee, he said, yeah, you had a lot of anger. And it's true. True. Lust. You know, Tuskegee tells about the 5 fingers of darkness. It's like anger, lust, greed, vanity, and attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Anger was big for me. Lust was big for me. Vanity, not so much. Greed, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
I've been one of the few Jews with no aptitude for money whatsoever. I've always managed to be poor when I didn't have to be so poor, but I just, and attachment, yeah, I'm sure I had some, like everybody, but it wasn't one of my worst things. I think my worst too was anger and lust, you know, but these days, you know, I don't have any of that, and no, really hardly any attachments, you know, including to living. I like to live longer because I feel like I have a lot of work I want to complete,
mm-hmm.
and I also feel like I'm improving conceptually, at least, if not physically,
mm-hmm.
on the drums. So I'd like to see how far I can take it, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not, you know, I'm not afraid of death or look at it as a negative thing. I'm not that attached, you know. I would like to finish some of my recording projects. That's big for me, and I'd like to play more for people. So thank you again for setting up this gig that's on January 18th at the Nelson Drum Shop in Nashville.
Yep, and that's online as well for people. If you go to soundrhythm.com, there's online tickets as well. Masterclass, and then Danny Gottlieb, Jeff Coffin, and Michael Adkins are Coffin and Michael Adkins are playing. So 2 saxophones and 2 drums.
2 drums. We may have a few guests come in too. We'll see. You know,
mm-hmm.
Danny wants to bring his wife Beth in. She's a classical. She's a percussionist.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think she's just classical. Yeah.
No, I hope not. No, if she's gonna play with us, we're not gonna be playing. You know, any Tchaikovsky.
Yeah. So what has stayed the same about you?
What has stayed the same? Well, I've always been, let's say, a visionary, and I've always been kind of rebel spirit. You know, I didn't go along with the, you know, I always was that way. I mean, as far as I know, you know, remember when they were having this big controversy about Colin Kaepernick, like kneeling for the national anthem, the football player, right? It became a big deal, and Trump made a big deal about it and stuff. Man, I used to refuse to do the Pledge of Allegiance when I was in 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Believe me, I was the only kid doing that.
Yeah.
Because I said, I'm not going to salute the flag. This is the flag that brutalized, terrorized, and committed genocide on Native American people.
Yeah.
But they, you know, that was shocking behavior, man. So I was always like that, you know, like what's that Bob Marley saying? I rebel music. Hey, Mr. Cop, I ain't got no birth certificate on me now. It's a great tune. But so that I think is true, and the kind of the visionary aspect. I remember sitting in a field one time, because I'm not a country boy. I was a city kid. Although I did grow up in Queens where there was a lot of grass and stuff, but it's still a city. But I remember my folks took me somewhere out in the country, and I remember sitting in a field and listening to the wind blow through the grass. And I heard it like a symphony to me. I sat there for an hour, and people, what are you listening to? I said, don't you hear that? I heard all these melodies and harmonies. And also, I've always had a pretty high degree of psychic awareness. There was a guy that was a friend of my dad who made his living as a folk singer, played guitar, wrote songs, and could go around with just a guitar, and he was somewhat popular. But his real goal was, his real passion was composing. He was a classical composer, modern classical music, American composer. And as you know, it's very hard for American classical people to get their stuff played, because the classical world is tilted towards the European. That's where all the great masters come from, Europe or Russia or somewhere over there, Italy. But there are great American composers. But anyway, so his dream was to record this piece, and he spent his life savings. He rented a small, it wasn't a full 100-piece, but it was like a chamber orchestra, maybe 30 people. But still, it was his life savings to record his piece. And for some reason, I was like 8 years old. And he asked my dad, he said, I really like your son to listen to this piece and tell me. And I wasn't a musician. I was an 8-year-old kid. And how often does an 8-year-old kid get asked his opinion about a piece of music?
Or anything.
Or anything, right. But I mean, but I was honored, because I felt, well, this guy's interested in what I have to say. I'm just a kid, you know. And I listened to the music, and I remember now, I heard a whole story about this guy who was trying to do something. He was frustrated. He was always blocked. He was trying to break through. And I don't remember now, but I was 8 years old. But I told this whole long, he said, that's the story of my life. He said, that's what I wrote. That's you got exactly the story behind this piece of music. So I have had that kind of, let's say, gift for, let's say, a certain psychic awareness. Just like when I heard Train for the first time, which I believe was 1961, I went to a concert. It was either Carnegie Hall or Town Hall. I think it's Town Hall, but the girl that I took on a date said she thought it was Carnegie Hall. She might be right. But we sat in the nosebleed seats, you know, the last row, because I was a kid. I had a cheap ticket. And we saw Sonny Rollins' band, first Monk's band, which had Charlie Rouse. I think Frankie Dunlap was on drum. Sonny Rollins' band. Sonny came out with a mohawk and a white tuxedo. This was soon after he'd come back from his exile, and he'd been pumping iron until he looked like a weightlifter or something. Paul Bley on piano, Henry Grimes on bass, and Roy McCurdy, one of the great drummers. And then came on Coltrane's group. And of course, Monk was great. Loved Monk. Sonny was great. That band was amazingly great. But when Train came out, it was totally different vibe. I heard it immediately. The other thing was about music. Train really wasn't about music. It was highly musical. And I didn't even know the word spiritual then. I'm 13 or something. You know, I didn't know what that meant even, but I felt this was different. And also McCoy played on my favorite things. By the way, it was Elvin McCoy and Steve Davis. This was even before Jimmy joined the band. Steve Davis was the bass player on the first recording of My Favorite Things on Atlantic, before he went to Impulse Records and everything. And I had that record. I wore it out, man. But I remember that McCoy played this comping pattern for like 15 minutes, just and it was so egoless. And some people would say, oh, he can't play. He's terrible. I knew he could play because I heard him on a record with the Jazz Tet, which was Benny Golson and Art Farmer, Tom McIntosh, a great group, but straight ahead group with nice charts. And McCoy, that might have been one of his earliest recordings. And you could tell he was great already. He was a master, and with the right hand playing beautiful. But in that setting, he just played, and there was no showing off. He was like, no, look, I can play. No, and that created this trance vibe. And it went on a long time, and Train just kept it, and Elvin too. And when Train finally came in on the soprano, it was like the dam broke. I never heard anything like it. And also it just, again, I felt, even though I didn't know the name or the word for it, I felt a big difference, you know. And that psychic awareness is why, and I don't mind saying it, as great as one of the all-time greats, I don't listen to Miles Davis music anymore. It's just too dark.
Mm-hmm.
I hear the misogyny, I hear the materialism, I hear the ego,
Mm-hmm.
and the greatness too, of course.
I mean, but is ego bad in music?
I don't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to hear it. For some people, it might be what they need. You know, it's like everybody's on a different path. At this point, I don't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're showing off, I don't want to hear it. And the people that I like the best didn't play that way.
Mm-hmm.
They may have had egos off the bench. And Rashid was like a saint. I'm sure he had an ego, and he was pissed off that he wasn't more famous, which he should have been, and made more money, which he should have. He had reason to be pissed off. But when he was playing, he was like an angel. He never got in the way. And playing free, that's really hard to do because it's easy to get in the way of the horns or whoever the lead is. Listen to him with Train or Tuskegee. He never gets in the way. When he's soloing, he's like, you know, but when he's playing behind the band, and of course, we as drummers, we check them out. We hear, look at what she's playing, beautiful. But it's not because, look at me, there's any look at me.
Yeah.
I hear some of these young guys, and I don't blame them because they're young, and that I did it too when I was young. And they're the hot shot. I'm not going to mention any names, but they're always, for me, playing too much. They don't let 8 bars go by without showing what a bad MF they are.
Yeah, and that's ego.
Yeah, I don't want to hear it. I understand it. I'm not judging them. I'm just saying I don't want to hear it. I hear Pete LaRocca on Basra. I don't hear it.
Yeah.
Nothing, not one thing too loud or too taking attention away, but it's great drumming. So
that's another
to
album.
me, or Live on Helm,
Mm-hmm.
totally different band.
band.
You know, there's nothing extra. You know, one of the all-time great drummers, but it's totally playing for the music.
Great singer.
Great singer too, and they're doing both at the same time. It's a trip, man. He's one of my all-time. He's in my top 10 all-time favorite drummers. So, or Roger Hawkins, man. I don't hear any ego in his drumming. He played just what was needed. Yeah. No more, no less. Mm-hmm. Right. But many of us play too much, and many of us suffer. You know, we suffer ego. But ego, in the end, is pain, man. It's just going to bring you more pain. And as I think, I'll go again. It might be necessary for certain people at certain stages of their development. People always say that athletes have to have the ego, but then I guess they do. Great athletes. But then I notice a difference when I see Stephen Curry play, who is one of my heroes, my favorite basketball player. Mm-hmm. Probably he knows he's a bad dude. He's the greatest shooter that ever lived. Mm. But when he plays team ball, man, he passed the ball, man, and he's moving without the ball when he doesn't have it. So I see that's one of the reasons I like that team is because they play that way. Mm-hmm. The early Celtics used to play that way too. Even the early Knicks, I remember, used to play that way, like passing, and whoever had the best shot, it wasn't. So you know, I think there's something to be said. For that, definitely in the music, I don't want to hear the ego anymore or showing off, you know. And put it this way, a lot of music is impressive, but I don't want to be impressed. Mm-hmm. I want to be moved. I want to be touched. I want to make me cry. Mm-hmm. Don't make me, you're fantastic. You know, I don't care about that. You know, that's my evolution, but that's also my psychic awareness of it. You know. And to tell where the music's coming from. And it's coming from a dark place to hear that. And it still may be great music, but recognize where it's coming from and also understand if you get too deep into that music, a lot of these people are worshiping these old jazz guys, but they don't know how dark and dysfunctional some of those lives are. Mm-hmm. And you're taking on a lot of that karma. And I think you should be careful of that. Yeah. You know. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking and taking the time.
I would have rather played more, but that's okay. But you had a lot of questions, talking points. So.
Yeah. Well, another time we could do more playing. But people should know that you can check out the Nashville masterclass and concert online as well. Go to soundandrhythmdrummingschool.com. Tickets are there. Ra Kalam, under Ra Kalam, and Danny Gottlieb is going to be playing drums also.
We're looking forward to playing with him, man.
And first time ever that they've played together.
We play together again, and getting him to play free it'll be great. I can't wait to hear what he comes up with.
And Jeff Coffin.
Jeff Coffin, yeah.
And Michael Adkins.
Michael Adkins.
Two horns, 2 saxophones, and 2 drum sets. And
Yeah.
possibly other guests.
Yeah, we'll see. You know, there's people who like to play, you know, but I kind of want to keep it simple to begin with, but we'll see. Danny really wants to bring Beth in on it, so maybe we'll have to talk to him about it. You know, if she can play some colors, that would be great. Sounds and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But I love, you know, we're going to feature the drummers on that one. And also, let me reiterate that if people are interested in my recordings, they're almost all of them are on Bandcamp. All of them will eventually be on Bandcamp. And also that I did these videos from a company called My Masterclass, and my video is called Living Music. And there's 2 of them. They're about 45 minutes long. They were recorded in my old place in Quincy by my old my engineer, who really knew how to record the drums. So the sound is really good.
And I thought David's building a studio where he is now.
Yeah. I'm hoping to visit him and work with him there. I may have to make a trip back to Boston to finish up some of our work. Yeah, I saw the picture. The place looks nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We're gonna end this broadcast.
Thank you, everybody. It's Ra Kalam from Memphis, Tennessee, sending love and peace and happiness and joy to people. Happy holidays, happy birthday, Jesus, happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa, whatever else you choose to celebrate or not, or just celebrate life. Every day is a holy day.